Dr. Samantha Vega adjusted her lab coat, her fingers twitching with a mix of nervous energy and exasperation. She had been stationed on Earth for 6 months now, and while the Tkran's complex neural patterns fascinated her, their constant telepathic murmurs were driving her to the edge. She sighed, muttering, "Why couldn't they just evolve to speak like normal beings?" The Tkran Council stood before her, their translucent, tendril-like forms pulsing softly in shades of blue. Despite their serene appearance, Samantha couldn't shake the feeling they were silently judging her. Human researcher, one of them communicated telepathically, its voice a mix of curiosity and concern. "We sense your discomfort with connection. Does your species not value touch as a form of intimacy?" Samantha froze, her mind immediately spiraling into the unfortunate implications of their question. Well, we do, but," she hesitated, searching for words. "It's not required." The Tkran's tendrils shifted, their equivalent of raised eyebrows. "You are unique among your kind," the council continued. "We sense an aversion to physical connection. Are you defective?" "Defective?" Samantha spluttered, cheeks flushing. "No. I'm perfectly fine. I just prefer my personal space, okay?" At that moment, the doors to the research chamber slid open with an audible hiss, and in sauntered Captain Riker Hale. All 6 feet of his cocky, broad-shouldered self filled the room like an overconfident solar flare. He flashed a grin that could have powered a small starship. "Did I miss the part where we start holding hands?" he asked, his voice dripping with amusement. Samantha's shoulders tensed immediately. "You're late," she snapped, glaring at him. Riker shrugged, his grin widening. "Fashionably, as always." He leaned casually against the console, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "What's the topic? Intergalactic diplomacy? Or are we still figuring out how to hug without causing a diplomatic incident?" The Tkran tilted their tendrils toward Riker, their pulses shifting to a soft green. "Captain Hale, your openness to touch is admirable. It is unfortunate Dr. Vega does not share your proclivity." Samantha groaned, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Can we not make this a thing? It's a personal preference, not a proclivity." Riker smirked, leaning closer to her. "Relax, document. No one's asking you to lead a cuddle session. Though, if you ever change your mind, I'm available for consultations." The Tkran hummed in unison, their pulses flickering with what Samantha swore was amusement. "Perhaps Captain Hale can assist you in overcoming your limitation." "That won't be necessary," Samantha said through gritted teeth. Riker, clearly enjoying her discomfort, raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I don't mind helping. You just need to tell me how you like it, gentle, firm, or somewhere in between." Samantha stared at him, her face a mix of horror and disbelief. "You are insufferable." "Thank you," Riker replied with a mock bow. The Tkran, apparently taking his words at face value, turned to Samantha. "Perhaps this is why humans are unique among species. Your tactile interactions are nuanced. Fascinating." Samantha threw her hands up. "It's not that deep. Humans just touch things. It's how we're wired, okay? Some of us just prefer not to." Riker chuckled. "You're doing great, document very convincing." Before Samantha could retort, one of the Tkran extended a tendril toward her. "May we attempt this, human touch?" Her eyes widened as she instinctively stepped back. Maybe not right now. Baby steps, okay?" Riker stepped in, taking the tendril in his hand with ease. "See? Easy. Just a firm grip, little shake, and voila, friendship initiated." The Tkran pulsed bright green, seemingly delighted. "This is most illuminating. Dr. Vega, you must learn this art. It will enrich your studies and your spirit." Samantha crossed her arms, glaring at Riker. "You're enjoying this way too much." "Guilty," he replied with a wink. The Tkran Council began to disperse, their murmurs of intrigue lingering in the room. Samantha turned to Riker, her voice low and deadly. "If you say one more word, He held up his hands in mock surrender. Not a word, document. But if you ever want lessons. Samantha didn't dignify him with a response, storming out of the chamber with her fists clenched. Riker watched her go, shaking his head with a chuckle. She'll thank me later, he muttered to himself, before following her out. Later that day, Samantha sat in her lab, furiously typing notes on her tablet. Her mind kept drifting back to Riker's obnoxious grin and the T'Kran's absurd fascination with human touch. It wasn't her fault she didn't want to spend her days being pawed at by aliens, or humans, for that matter. The sound of boots echoed down the corridor. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. Unless you have something intelligent to say, Captain, I'm busy. Riker leaned against the doorway, his trademark smirk firmly in place. I just came to check on your progress. You know, bonding with the locals and all that. She didn't bother hiding her irritation. If you mean me humiliating myself in front of the T'Kran Council, then yes, progress is being made. Slowly. He strolled in, hands in his pockets, looking far too comfortable in her space. You know, you could just let me help. I'm great at breaking down barriers. Got away with people. Breaking down barriers, she shot back. You bulldoze through them with all the subtlety of a drunken hovercraft. Riker laughed. And yet, it works. Before she could respond, her tablet chimed with a notification. A message from the T'Kran Council blinked on the screen. Samantha groaned as she read it. They want me to demonstrate human bonding techniques at the next council meeting. Apparently, I'm the perfect subject for an interspecies study. Riker whistled low. Wow. That's a tall order, document. Guess you'll have to get over your little touch thing, huh? She glared at him. It's not a thing. It's a perfectly valid personal boundary. Sure it is, he said, smirking. But the T'Kran don't seem to care. So, what's the plan? Her shoulders slumped. I don't know. They're expecting some grand display of humanity's so-called unique connection, and I'm supposed to lead it. I don't even know where to start. Riker's grin widened. Lucky for you, I'm an expert in human connection. She rolled her eyes. Oh, I bet you are. Ignoring her sarcasm, he grabbed a nearby chair and sat across from her. All right, let's practice. Give me your hand. She stared at him like he'd grown a second head. What? No. Come on, document. You can't avoid this forever. Might as well start small. He extended his hand, palm up, and waited. Samantha hesitated, her mind racing with excuses, but the look on his face, somewhere between challenge and encouragement, made her reconsider. With a resigned sigh, she reached out and placed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, she flinched, and Riker immediately tightened his grip. Relax, he said, his tone softer than she expected. It's just a hand. Nothing scary about it. She glared at him. Easy for you to say. He chuckled. You know, you're pretty cute when you're annoyed. Her eyes narrowed. I take it back. This is worse than scary. He ignored her, gently guiding her hand in what he called the perfect handshake. His fingers were warm, his grip firm but not overpowering. To her surprise, it wasn't entirely unpleasant. See? You're a natural, he said, releasing her hand. She quickly pulled back, wiping her palm on her lab coat. Congratulations. You've cured me of my fear of handshakes. Now what? Riker leaned back, clearly enjoying himself. Well, we could move on to hugs, but I think that might be a bit advanced for you. Samantha groaned. Why do I feel like this is just an excuse for you to annoy me? Because it is, he said with a grin. But also, because you need it. You can't expect the T'Kran to take you seriously if you can't even handle a little human interaction. She hated that he had a point. Fine, she said, crossing her arms. But don't push your luck. Oh, Doc, he said, standing and heading for the door. With you, luck's the only thing keeping me alive. As he walked away, she couldn't help but feel a small, grudging appreciation for his persistence. Annoying as he was, Riker had a way of getting under her skin, and, she admitted reluctantly, maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. The next morning, Samantha stood in the Tkran Council chamber, heart pounding as she prepared for the demonstration. The council members floated in a semicircle, their tendrils pulsing a curious lavender. The stakes felt impossibly high, and her nerves were not helped by the fact that Riker stood just a few feet away, leaning casually against a console with that infuriating smirk on his face. Dr. Vega, one of the Tkran spoke, their telepathic voice smooth and resonant. We eagerly await your display of human connection. It will be an honor to witness your species' unique approach to bonding. She cleared her throat, her palms slick with sweat. Ah, right. About that, it's important to remember that humans are complex, and, bonding can take many forms. Her voice trailed off as she realized she was rambling. Riker clapped his hands, cutting through the awkward silence. No need to overthink it, document. Let's just show them how it's done. He stepped forward, giving her a look that was equal parts encouragement and challenge. She shot him a glare but nodded reluctantly. Fine. Let's start simple. To her surprise, Riker grabbed her hand without hesitation, intertwining his fingers with hers. Samantha stiffened, every muscle in her body screaming to pull away, but she held her ground. See, he said, turning to the council. This is a basic human gesture called holding hands. It's a way to show support, affection, or just be close to someone. The Tkran's tendrils flickered with interest. Fascinating. Does this act have deeper implications? Samantha opened her mouth to respond, but Riker beat her to it. Sometimes, yeah. Holding hands can be a gateway to something more intimate. He shot her a cheeky grin, and she immediately regretted letting him speak. Can we stick to the basics? She hissed under her breath. Riker shrugged, clearly unbothered. All right, document. Your turn. Lead the way. Taking a deep breath, she moved to the next step, awkwardly positioning herself in front of him. This is called a hug, she explained, her voice wavering slightly. She wrapped her arms around his torso in what could only be described as the stiffest embrace imaginable. Riker chuckled, his arms coming around her easily. Relax, Vega. You're hugging me, not bracing for impact. The Tkran observed the exchange with intense focus. This action appears unbalanced. Is there a reason one of you seems more willing? Samantha flushed. It's just different for everyone. Riker leaned closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. You're making me look bad, document. Loosen up a little. Loosen up, she hissed back. I'm one step away from a panic attack. You'll live, he replied with a wink, tightening the hug just enough to make her squirm. She reluctantly relaxed into the embrace, her shoulders dropping slightly. To her surprise, it wasn't as awful as she'd expected. Riker was warm, steady, and, though she'd never admit it out loud, comforting in a way she hadn't experienced in a long time. The Tkran Council murmured amongst themselves, their tendrils shifting in hues of green and yellow. This display is most intriguing. The proximity seems to enhance emotional connectivity. Is this pleasurable for humans? Samantha's face turned scarlet, and she quickly stepped back, putting as much distance between herself and Riker as possible. It's not about pleasure, she stammered. It's about connection. Riker, ever the opportunist, grinned and crossed his arms. Depends on the context, really. Hugs can definitely be pleasurable if... Don't, Samantha interrupted, her tone sharp enough to cut through Durasteel. The council, oblivious to the tension, continued their analysis. We must attempt this gesture ourselves to fully understand its significance. Before Samantha could stop them, two of the Tkran floated toward each other, their tendrils awkwardly wrapping around one another in a mimicry of a hug. The result was less heartwarming and more unsettling, as their bodies emitted a strange, high-pitched hum that grew louder by the second. Ah, is it supposed to do that? Riker asked, his grin faltering. Samantha's eyes widened in alarm. No. Definitely not. The hum reached a crescendo, and the Tkran suddenly released each other, their tendrils flailing as a bright burst of energy filled the chamber. When the light faded, one of the Tkran spoke, its tone laced with awe. The sensation was overwhelming. We may require further practice. Riker laughed, clapping Samantha on the shoulder. Looks like you've started a trend, document. She groaned, dragging a hand down her face. This is a disaster. Nah, he said, still grinning. This is comedy gold. The Tkran turned back to them, their pulses steadying. We are grateful for your demonstration. Your species' approach to bonding is enlightening. Samantha forced a tight smile, silently vowing to throttle Riker the first chance she got. The aftermath of the council meeting was a blur. Samantha retreated to her lab, her mind spinning with the bizarre turn of events. The Tkran had taken to human touch in a way she had never anticipated. She had barely escaped their eager attempts to experiment with bonding gestures. Riker, of course, had been no help, only adding fuel to the fire with his teasing and his complete lack of boundaries. She let out a long, exasperated sigh as she sank into her chair, massaging her temples. This is a nightmare, she muttered to herself. The door chimed, and before she could react, Riker strolled in, casually holding a data pad like he was on a casual stroll, not interrupting her post-council breakdown. Hey, Doc, he said, flashing that infuriating grin. You left in such a hurry, I thought I'd check in. She didn't look up. You're lucky I haven't thrown you out of here yet. Oh, come on. It wasn't that bad, was it? He sat down across from her without waiting for an invitation, his posture too relaxed for someone who had just contributed to a major diplomatic faux pas. Samantha looked up at him, frustration bubbling over. You think that was bad? The Tkran are now obsessed with human bonding rituals. They're running around trying to hug each other like some bizarre alien soap opera, and I'm the one they're looking to for advice. What was I supposed to do, Riker? Start a hugging revolution? Riker leaned back in the chair, the smirk still plastered on his face. Well, you did sort of plant the seed. And hey, it's good they're learning about touch. You just gave them a little push in the right direction. Push? More like shove them off a cliff, she retorted. Ah, but look on the bright side, you might have just helped them evolve. Riker's tone was light, but there was a flicker of sincerity in his eyes. Samantha rolled her eyes. I'll be waiting for the thank you card from the Tkran when they start hugging every human they see. I'll even sign the card with I told you so. Don't worry, document. I'll have your back when the whole hugging crisis goes intergalactic, he said with mock seriousness. Samantha couldn't help but snort, the tension easing just a little. She leaned back in her chair, her mind still racing with the chaos of the last few hours. What's next, Riker? Are they going to demand I show them how to high-five? Maybe teach them to kiss? Now that, Riker said with a mischievous glint in his eye, is a lesson I'd happily help with. No charge, of course. She shot him a look that could have melted steel. Not helping. He held up his hands, feigning innocence. All right. I'll let you off the hook for now. But, seriously, don't sell yourself short. You're doing important work here. Samantha sighed, her fingers tapping absent-mindedly on the desk. I guess. But I didn't expect my whole career to be based on touch. Hey, it's the Tkran, not you. You've just got a front-row seat to the greatest interspecies hug fest of the century. Greatest hug fest, huh? I should start a fan club, she muttered sarcastically. Riker chuckled, then leaned forward, his demeanor shifting ever so slightly. I get it, document. It's uncomfortable. But sometimes, you just have to roll with it. Embrace the chaos, even if it feels awkward. Samantha shot him a flat look. Not helping. He winked. I'll leave you to think about it. But you've got this. You're a human connection expert now. I prefer reluctant expert, she said dryly. Riker stood, brushing off his uniform. Hey, maybe the Tkran will surprise you. They could become the best damn huggers in the galaxy. She couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. I can't wait to see them try. As Riker turned to leave, he paused at the door. Oh, and Doc? If they start asking about kissing techniques, you might want to rethink your no-help policy. Not a chance, she called after him, but the laugh that followed took the edge off her frustration. The door slid shut behind him, and Samantha allowed herself a rare moment of relief. She had no idea how the Tkran were going to turn out after all this, but one thing was certain, her life on this alien planet would never be the same. And, in a strange way, she was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't so bad.